Hi guys, Danny here, and welcome to my mod review of the mod Factorization by Neptune Pink. This mod adds a lot of content, so I'm going to be breaking this review up into a few different parts, and in this part I will be dealing with the basics. Okay, to start the mod you need to get yourself one of these guys, the manual. To make the manual you need to put together a book, an ink sac, and the logic matrix programmer, or the LMP. You need the LMP to make pretty much everything and to do pretty much everything in factorization. And say for this recipe, the LMP isn't used up. Like in most recipes, you can make more of them by using one of these guys. So if I put out the recipe again, there you go. To make another one, you need one to start off with. You also have this alternate recipe, but this is going to be the more used recipe because this is a lot harder because of the discs. But if you didn't find, if you can't find one of these guys at all, you always have this recipes to fall back on. Okay, so like I said, factorization manual, and if I go to about, like it says here, you can make the book by squeezing an ink sac between your book and your LMP. And the navigation is pretty important as well because this book is quite fast and there is a lot of information that you have to read. Okay. The ores in the material. As you can see here, this mod adds two different kinds of ores, dark iron and silver. Here we go, silver ore and dark iron. You find dark iron close to the bedrock, as it says here, and you need to use it to make pretty much any of the more higher tier machinery, so it's quite important. And lastly, we also need diamond shards, which you get by blowing up diamond with any kind of explosion, diamond block that is, and if you blow up a diamond block you're going to get 18 shards, and you can use the 18 shards to make different machines and different machine parts. Okay, and now there we go, the LMP. There's two kinds of ways to make it, this and this, like I said. Okay, before looking at any of the machines, even the more really low tier ones, we're going to be looking at the charge energy, which is like the energy used in this mod. There are two different methods to generating it. You have this method here, where you use mirrors to heat the water, and use that method to produce electricity, or charge rather. Here are the different recipes. And you have this method where you used a calorimetric burner to burn food to create the heat instead of using the mirrors. And if you notice, these two blocks are always the same in either recipes, as you can see there. Two blocks, the same. And now I'm going to be going over the two setups here. So like I said, these two blocks are the same, so you need a water boiler and a steam turbine. In the first method, you're using the mirrors to heat up the water to produce steam, which charges up the Leyden jar that I'm using to store power. What the water boiler does is it sucks up the water, turns it into steam, which goes to the steam turbine and produces charge, as you can see there. It's using up the steam, produce charge, and it's being stored in this Leyden jar, as you can see there. And we also have this method. Same setup, these two blocks. So the water boiler is taking up the water. It's not producing steam at the moment because the calorimetric burner requires some kind of food to burn it. So as you can see, not producing anything. The Leyden jar is not too good of a method to produce a small amount of power because you need a lot of power to get it started. Okay, so what you need to do is supply this with food. So I'm just going to get some steak, or rather let me just get some cooked steak, and I'm going to put it inside one of these barrels that comes in the mod, which works like a hopper barrel, so it just automatically puts food inside of the calorimetric burner. So now it should be heating up. There you go, it's producing steam, and this guy, the steam turbine, is producing charge, and the charge is being stored in the Leyden jar. Or at least it's going in the Leyden jar. I don't think it's really storing anything. Okay, now the calorimetric burner, the amount of heat it produces from the food depends on how good the food is when you eat it yourself. So the better the food, the more steam you produce. So back in the book, as it says here, 10 mirrors is sufficient to generate a small amount of charge, but this method does require a bit of silver. As you can see here, quite a bit of silver for each mirror. And we also have the calorimetric burner. And the calorimetric burner will digest the food fed to it and it will convert it into heat. Better quality food lasts for longer. So like I said, if the food is better, if it, heals more hunger, then it will produce more heat. There we go. Now the transferring of the charge is pretty simple. You just use these lead wires and you just lead them up from your source to your battery or machines that you're using it with, and you can just do it that way. And the cool thing about the lead wires and pretty much all of the machines is you can use one of these charge meters and just right click and it'll tell you how much charge or how much steam or how much water, just basically information. And say over here in the servos, you can also right click, it'll tell you how much charge you have, so that's pretty cool as well. Okay, as it says here, any block that uses charge will conduct it amongst its block. This creates a network, and charge is distributed evenly amongst every block in the network, so that's quite important. So any amount of charge, there is going to be an even number along all of the transferable items. So if I use the charge meter here, you'll see that the charge is 40 even amongst all of these servo rails here. So that's quite important as well. Okay, the measurement thing is you just use the charge meter, which I was using just there. So like I said, just right click to get information about the different items or the amount of charge stored in the items. Whoops, that's not right. And here we go. This is how you can use the lead wire. You can see it there. Pretty compact. Okay. Okay, so like I said, there are a few ways of storing the charge. One way is just to have a lot of wire because like I said, it spreads it evenly, but it's not too efficient. So what you can do is get yourself a battery block, which is pretty good at storing a small amount of power. And when you make it, it comes pre-charged. And you can also use a comparator to measure how full it is. And when it's broken, it keeps its charge. Alternatively, you have the Leyden jars, which can store a large amount of power. It is quite cheap to craft, as you can see here, just a few glass panes, lead blocks, but it is incredibly inefficient, like I showed you over there. I've had this set up for hours now, and the Leyden jar is not storing any power, any charge at all. So, like I said, it is incredibly inefficient. But it can store a large amount of power, and it also requires a large amount of power before it can actually start charging. So like the battery, you can use a comparator to measure how full it is, and to use the comparator, you just use this setup here to automate the production of charge. So because this battery is full, the calorimetric burner isn't on. And it's not producing any steam, but as you can see there is steak in there. So say I destroyed the battery block, so the battery is empty. Okay, now the redstone comparator is off, and this calorimetric burner has started eating up the steak. And there you go, the steam is starting to be produced. And the charge is increasing as well. So there you go, that's how you automate it using a comparator. Okay, now let's have a look at the machines. First of all, we have the stamper, and a stamper is a simple crafting machine. Any item that is inserted into it will be crafted by itself. Basically what it means is if you throw in, say, a piece of wood, it will be converted into planks. So it's pretty simple. So here is the stamper, you can see the recipe there. And over here I just have a lot of birchwood, and I have this lever here. So if I flick this, what's going to happen is the birchwood is going to be used by itself, so it will be producing these planks. So there you go, pretty simple. Okay, next we have the packager. So the packager it's a slightly more complicated than the stamper. When 9 or 4 items have been inserted into it, it tries to craft them. First, you'll try to craft them into a 3x3 grid, and if there's no recipe, it will try crafting them into a 2x2 grid. And like the stamper, its inputs are on the top and the sides, and the output is the bottom. And if the item can be crafted as both 3x3 and 2x2, then an item sifter can be used to insert the appropriate amounts of item for later use. I'll talk about the item shifter later on, but here we go, the packager. So the packager can make a 3x3 recipe or a 2x2 recipe of any kind of item. I just have sand in there, so if I flick this, 4 pieces of sand is going to be turned into sandstone. But say I had the cobble recipe from extra utilities, basically a 3x3 of cobble will be turned into compressed cobblestone. So if I just threw in 9 cobble there, it would turn it into compressed cobble by itself. I don't have the recipe or the mod, so I can't do it, but here you go. You can see that 4 sand was turned into sandstone. Okay, next we have the mixer, which is a really cool item that you can use to mass produce items. It has 4 input slots and 4 output slots, and when mixing, you're allowed to put in items for a crafting recipe in any way you want. For example, 1 stack of bowls, 2 stack of red mushroom, 1 stack of brown mushrooms will produce the mushroom stew. It will require charge to operate, but if you keep it stocked with a sufficient amount of crafting materials, it will keep crafting faster and faster. And like the other machines, crafting ingredients are inserted from the top and the sides, and you can remove the items produced from the bottom. So here we go. This is the mixer here, and I'm just using lead wire and this Leyden jar to power it. Hopefully there is charge inside of the Leyden jar. Okay, there is. So in this item hopper here, I just have a bowl, mushroom, just brown mushrooms, and more bowls and more red mushrooms. So I just flick this lever. There we go. We can see the recipe just there. Even though there is, uneven amounts of items, the mushroom stew will still be produced. What I can also do is break up this brown mushroom like that. So let me just take this out for a moment and put half there, but the mixer will still produce the mushroom stew. So here we go. Okay, I can also say break up the bowl there and it'll still produce it. So like I said, you can have the recipe in weird ways and it will still produce the items and the 2x2 insert here and the 2x2 output. Okay, next let's have a look at the slag furnace. So what I'm gonna do is that and throw some iron ore in there. And as you can see, there's 2 output slots. So what's going to happen is, okay, for this you're only going to get iron, but say for redstone or something, there's a 20% chance that you're going to get stone, and 580% chance you're going to get redstone. So it's going to be somewhere between 5 to 6 redstone, closer to 6 redstone per redstone ore. Dirty iron gravel, that's something else which I'll talk about in later. So there we go, iron ore, 40% chance to give you smooth stone and 120% chance of giving you iron ingots. So 120 would be anywhere between 1 to 2, but closer to 1. Same with gold ore, as you can see there, and copper ore, and okay, that's just copper from a different mod. Never mind that. Silver is 100% silver ore and 120% lead, meaning you actually have a greater percent chance of getting lead. than silver, so you can get anywhere from 1 to 2, but you're only going to get 1 silver per silver ore. Dark iron, you're going to get 40% chance of getting stone, and that's pretty much it. Okay, there you go. Small chance of getting smooth stone, and I have gotten some smooth stone. Next we move on to quite a unique way of crafting, compression crafting. With compression crafting, instead of crafting with items in a crafting grid, you craft with blocks out in the world. So as you can see here, this setup here with 2 cobblestone blocks and a barrel full of sticks will produce a stone sword because there's only 2 cobblestone. You make it using these compression crafter blocks, and you can have the rings anywhere from 3x3 to 1x1. So in a 1x1 you would be making, say, planks or sticks from logs, and in 3x3 you can make things like furnaces. Now you have to have these blocks here facing exactly as you see here, so the side with the crafting grid sort of thing has to be facing inwards, and all you need to do is give it a redstone signal and it will produce the items. So over here you can see the setup used to produce furnaces, so a cobblestones in a ring like that. Okay, and finally you can even do things like this. This is a setup for a piston. So you can just have cobblestone, redstone block, iron storage block, and logs, and you can use it in, instead of redstone dust, iron ingot, and planks to produce the pistons. So I have 2 setups here. So like I said, this side with the crafting grid sort of thing has to face inwards. Let me just destroy this, and okay, so you can see the crafting grid sort of thing on top. If I just right click here, the crafting grid sort of thing faces inwards, and I have these barrels here with some kinds of item. The item I don't actually remember, but if I flick this switch, oops, that's on, there you go, we can see the animation there, and it produced just a lot of stone sword. So basically I had cobble there, and sticks there, and I produced these stone swords. Now I have a similar recipe here, but instead of fully barrels, I'm using birch wood. So I have a log there, and a barrel full of sticks, I think. Nothing in this chest. Let me just throw in, another chest here, just in case. And okay, you can see the animation and the logs were used up. So if I go check here, you can see that I made wooden swords. So what happened was the logs got turned into planks, both of them, and then the sticks were used up from this barrel here, and it was all crafted together to form these swords. So you can see how easy it is to mass produce the items. So what you can do is have these barrels, be supplied with the items and have like some kind of clock giving the redstone signal, and you can produce large amounts of items. So it's pretty cool. Okay, the next bit, which is the Parasieve. Now the Parasieve is like a filter, and you use it to filter items that is going in and out of inventories. What you need to do is place the Parasieve against an inventory, and any machine that attempts to access the Parasieve will access the inventory through it. Now the Parasieve's GUI allows you to define up to 4 classes of items. Items that do not fit in the classes cannot be inserted or extracted through the Parasieve. Basically, according to these 4, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, according to these 5, well, 4 more or less, because the last one is kind of awkward to understand. These 4 rules, and if the items fall into any of these rules, they will be filtered. Okay, you can also use the Parasieve with comparators. They'll only count the items passing through the filter. And you can also use comparators to give a more precise count of items if a range is defined, so you can just read the rule there. And finally, you can also chain the Parasieves, so you can filter various amounts of items, and you can also use the Parasieve to pass items to Minecrafts and servos. Oh, and you can also use a redstone signal to invert the filter, so that's pretty cool itself. Now let's see, I have a build here somewhere. Okay, here it is. Now the 4 rules. Let's check them out. If no item class are defined, then anything can pass to the filter. Now that's pretty simple to understand. So if I take away any of these guys, anything that I put into it will pass into the chest. There we go. Second rule is that if an item is alone, it'll be matched exactly. Now that's pretty easy to understand as well. So let me just get more of these guys, throw a chest in there. And there you go, the chest will pass through. However, if I was to throw in this red dye, it will not pass through because I have it set to chest. But remove that and the dye will pass through. The third one is if 2 items with different levels of damage are compared, then items within the quality may pass. So this one, say you have enchants or damage values, then say you have a fully repaired sword and a half damage sword, then anything between those two will pass. Okay, on to rule 4, which is the best one of them all. So basically, if 2 items with text written on them are compared, then all similar items with or without the matching text may pass. Basically, that means if 2 items from the same mod are thrown inside of the Parasieve, any item from those mods can pass through. So there we go. This is not from Factorization, so that can't pass. But the calorimetric burner is. The chest isn't from Factorization, so it can't pass, but the Leyden jar is. So there we go. Only items from Factorization may pass if you throw Factorization items inside of the Parasieve. Okay, moving on to the last thing, which is the barrels. Barrels work like barrels do in every other mod. It has no GUI. You right click to place items, left click to remove items, shift left click to remove a single item, because just normal left clicking will remove a stack, and double right click to fill the barrel from your inventory of whatever items in the barrel. Barrels can have direction and orientation. Clicking near the side edge of a block will place the barrel with its top pointing to that side. I'll show that in a second. And barrels can only be extracted from the bottom and inserted from the top or the back. Now there are a few different varieties of barrels. There is the hopping barrel, which I showed, which works like a barrel and a hopper. It does a little jump and it will place its item onto whatever inventory is underneath it. We also have the silky barrel, which will hold its content if you break it with a silk touch axe. And if you're under the influence of a strength potion, you can push barrels with a knockback sword. So it's pretty good. So you can see the recipes here. The variations of the barrels are quite straightforward, but basically to place the barrels facing a certain side, all you need to do is point towards the edge of a block and it'll give you this arrow. And you can just place it and the arrow will point towards where the top of the barrel will be. So yeah, there you go, pretty simple.